Okay, picture this for a second. It's a gorgeous, warm summer night. You've got your absolute best friends over, the music's pumping, drinks are flowing. Everyone's just having a totally carefree time in the backyard pool. It's literally the quintessential party vibe, right? The kind of night you kind of wish would never end. But what happens when that perfectly curated, highly anticipated night takes a totally horrific turn? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down 3 absolutely disturbing true internet horror stories. We're going to deconstruct exactly how a fun, innocent gathering can just instantly transform into an absolute nightmare. We'll be analyzing the very real vulnerabilities that, honestly, we all just ignore when we're simply trying to have a good time. So, what happens when the ultimate teenage dream literally becomes a fight for survival? In every single one of the 3 case studies we're looking at today, the victims genuinely thought they were in a completely safe, controlled environment. I mean, they were protected by gates, secured by locks, and surrounded by friends. But as we're about to see, safety in numbers? Yeah, it's often a really, really dangerous illusion. All right, let's get right into case study 1, the uninvited guest. So this one goes down in Orlando, Florida. We've got a 22-year-old host who decides to throw a party while his parents are out of town. The ground rules were supposed to be simple. Keep it small, no alcohol, early curfew. Well, let's dive into this timeline and see exactly how fast all of that degrades. 8 p.m. hits, and the party kicks off, but it quickly swells to 13 people. And yeah, there's plenty of alcohol. By 10:30 p.m., that early curfew is completely ignored. And then, 11:30 p.m. This is absolutely the critical moment. The host runs inside for a second and distinctly hears rustling coming from the side bushes. But trusting his supposedly secure community gate, he just brushes it off. He dismisses it. And that single fatal assumption leads us straight to midnight. Right at midnight, the host is inside when these absolute blood-curdling screams erupt from the backyard. He sprints out to the patio, only to find his pool literally filled with blood on the surface. His friends are completely panicking, screaming that something, or someone, just grabbed one of the girl's legs from under the dark water and slashed her with a knife. And then, suddenly, a totally unfamiliar man rises out of the water. We're talking late 20s, tall, long, scraggly hair, this scruffy beard, covered in tattoos, and he's wearing absolutely nothing but these fatigued cargo shorts. The guy just bolts to the front of the house and vanishes into the night. It turns out this complete stranger had actually scaled the security gate, hid out in those exact rustling bushes the host heard earlier, and just slipped right into the dark pool alongside everybody else. Okay, let's step back and do a quick postmortem here to build a profile of vulnerability. Because later on, the host reviewed the security footage with the police, and wouldn't you know it, the cameras actually caught the intruder perfectly, but they went completely unchecked during the party. The failure points here are honestly textbook. First, the host relied entirely on the passive security of a gate, completely ignoring his active camera system. Second, he entirely dismissed a clear auditory warning, that rustling in the bushes, mainly because his judgment was, well, let's face it, pretty clouded by the alcohol. He basically just assumed that living in a gated community made him untouchable. Huge mistake. Moving on to case study 2, danger in the crowd. All right, so we're shifting gears from a relatively small Orlando gathering to a massive high school graduation pool party. This one's being thrown by a really popular kid named Darrell. And guys, a staggering 25% of the entire graduating class was crammed into his backyard. That 25% number, that sheer scale, is absolutely crucial to what happens next. So our narrator arrives and immediately tries to track down Darrell just to say hey, but nobody has seen him. He literally hasn't been spotted for nearly 2 hours. But, in a crowd this massive and chaotic, everyone just assumes, oh, he's probably inside hooking up with someone, right? It's just a normal party assumption. Well, later on in the night, the narrator really needs to use the restroom. The line upstairs is ridiculously long, so he figures he'll just venture down into the basement. He spots this locked door, and assuming it's just a downstairs bathroom, he manages to easily pick that simple privacy lock with his fingernail. But he doesn't find a bathroom. Instead, he pushes the door open into this pitch-black, freezing boiler room. The only source of illumination is this super faint, creepy yellow light buzzing from some machine in the far corner. And right there, bathed in that dim yellow light, he makes out the silhouette of a person, just ducking down, trying to hide behind this massive clutter of old tables and washing machines. Heart pounding, the narrator reaches up and yanks the hanging light switch to illuminate the room. And what he finds is straight out of a horror movie. Daryl, the host of this massive party, is just lying unconscious on the cold concrete floor in a bloody mess. He is covered in stab wounds. And then, suddenly, footsteps rush toward the basement door. For a split second, the attacker glances back over his shoulder, and the narrator locks eyes with him. It's Todd. Todd was this super quiet, heavily bullied kid from their graduating class. The narrator just starts screaming at the top of his lungs for help, which flushes Todd upstairs, where the entire living room full of people just stops and watches this kid flee straight out the front door. So, looking at the postmortem for this one, the absolute crucial takeaway is how the crowd itself literally became the weapon's accomplice. The bystander effect was in full force here. Every single person just assumed somebody else knew exactly where Daryl was. And by chalking his sudden disappearance up to just, standard party behavior, they unknowingly gave Todd a 2-hour window to commit a horrific attack right under their feet. It's a terrifying realization. A massive crowd does not guarantee your safety. Honestly, it often provides the absolute perfect cover for an attacker to just slip right in and out, unnoticed. All right, let's get into our final story. Case Study 3, The Shed Lurker. Okay, this scenario is just pure, unadulterated psychological terror. So we've got a homeowner hosting his very first housewarming party. By the early hours of the morning, it's totally died down. Only 2 heavily intoxicated friends, Rob and Dan, are left, and they're passed out asleep downstairs on the couches. The homeowner heads upstairs to finally get some sleep, but suddenly he hears this massive splash coming from the backyard pool. Now he's annoyed, right? He immediately assumes it's just Rob or Dan drunkenly messing around and getting his brand new carpets all wet. So he throws open the bedroom window to yell at them, but instead, he looks down and sees this strange figure in a black shirt just standing dead still in the middle of the water. He yells out the window at the guy. The figure slowly turns around, and they literally have this dead silent 10-second staring contest in the dark. Totally freaked out, but also frustrated, the homeowner marches downstairs, only to find Rob and Dan still fast asleep on the couches. They never even moved. At this point, the homeowner grabs the biggest kitchen knife he can find and flips on every single backyard light. But the pool is totally empty, and this brilliantly illustrates just how methodical this creep was. Let's trace the intruder's chilling path across the property. After standing silently in the swimming pool, the homeowner peers out and spots the figure again, this time sitting high up in the thick branches of a backyard tree. Naturally, he's too terrified to actually go outside, so he locks every single door, and that is when the psychological warfare really begins. The intruder slowly climbs down from the tree and starts tapping, just tap, tap, tapping on the sliding glass door. And eventually, he makes his final hiding spot right inside the homeowner's own backyard shed. So when that incessant tapping on the glass started, the absolutely terrified homeowner vigorously shook his friends, Rob and Dan, trying to wake them up. They groggily opened their eyes, took one sleepy look out the back window, saw nothing, literally told him he was being paranoid, and just went right back to sleep. I mean, can you even imagine the absolute dread? He was trapped inside his own house all night, just shaking, knowing full well a stranger was out there playing some kind of twisted, messed up game with him. Finally, the sun comes up. He walks outside and finds a mini stepping ladder placed purposefully right beneath that tree. And when he goes to put the ladder away in the shed, he locks eyes with the intruder, who is just staring right back at him through the shed window. The homeowner immediately calls the cops, but he just has to stand there and watches this tall creep with messy black hair and cargo pants calmly strolls out of the shed, out the side gate, and is just gone. Breaking down this final postmortem, I think the most glaring and honestly infuriating failure point is the friends totally invalidating the homeowner's primal instincts. Relying on heavily intoxicated people to back you up in a real emergency, that is a fatal flaw right there. Furthermore, the property lacked any sort of adequate outdoor security lighting, which made hiding incredibly easy. And finally, there was this extremely dangerous assumption that just because the interior doors of the house were locked, the perimeter was safe. As we saw, the yard was entirely compromised. Which brings us to surviving your next party. Okay, so it is definitely time to shatter the illusions that we all bring to our social gatherings. Let's look at the really stark contrast between our party assumptions and the actual security reality. First up, we always assume gates keep bad people out. Well, the reality is, a gate is totally useless if you don't actively check your cameras or investigate odd sounds. Next, we assume that massive crowds equals safety. The grim reality, as we learned, is that crowds provide the absolute ultimate camouflage for an unseen attacker to operate. And lastly, we just assume our friends will jump in and help us in a crisis. But the terrifying truth is that intoxicated friends are highly likely to just dismiss your very real fears, potentially leaving you entirely on your own when you need them most. Look, we design these spaces, our backyards, our pools, our homes. We design them to be these wonderful sanctuaries of fun and relaxation. But as these three true case studies absolutely prove, the very elements that make a party so great, the loud music, the drinks, the massive crowds, those are the exact same elements that can completely mask an absolute nightmare unfolding right beside you. So I'm going to leave you with this chilling thought to ponder tonight. Next time you're hosting a fun little gathering and you hear a random splash out in the dark, who is really in your pool? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Please stay vigilant out there, and I will see you in the next explainer.